Another day, another story. Hey guys, welcome back to Star Movie Recap YouTube channel.
Based on a true story, the tale follows the survival and escape of a young woman who uses her intelligence to outsmart her armed captor. Kara Robinson wakes up to the chirping of birds and her friend, Jess, also rises. Kara calls her mother, Deborah Johnson, to inform her about the lake house party that night and her plan to visit her dad earlier than usual that weekend, but Deborah isn't thrilled about it. Jess asks Kara to water the plants while she gets ready, and that's when a black muscle car passes by, later stopping in front of them. Richard Evenitz approaches Kara, pretending to sell magazines before pulling out a gun and commanding her to keep quiet and climb into a storage bin in the back seat of his car as they drive away. Kara struggles with a panic attack, and just later realizes that Kara is missing and finds the garden hose thrown aside. Meanwhile, Richard stops at a deserted area and warns Kara that she'll be bound and gagged, emphasizing that he's armed. Kara considers making a run for it but fears getting shot, so she waits. Richard returns, binds her and seals the container before continuing the journey. Jess contacts Deborah's office hoping that she picked up Kara without telling anyone, but Deborah denies it and grows worried about her daughter's sudden disappearance. She calls Kara's boyfriend Ryan to check if they are together, but he replies that Kara is not with him. Deborah then calls the police and rushes to Jess's house. Richard takes the container inside his house and warns Kara to stay quiet, escorting her to a bedroom where he reminds her that he's always armed. He instructs her to obey his command and interrogates her about her life, writing down her answers in a notebook. He orders her to lie down and keep quiet as he assaults her. Kara tries to keep calm and follow Richard's rules while waiting for a chance to escape. Deborah calls her ex-husband, Ron, to confirm that Kara isn't with him, and he affirms it. Deborah tearfully informs Ron that their daughter might have been abducted, and he rushes over. A police officer arrives at Jess's house and Deborah reports that Kara has been missing for 2 hours. But the officer dismisses her concern, thinking that Kara ran away. Deborah insists that her daughter is responsible and denies the possibility. The officer advises her to wait in case Kara calls before leaving at Richard's house. Kara tries to gather information while waiting for an opportunity to flee. She engages Richard in small talk and discovers that he was in the Navy. Richard assures her that she won't get hurt if she follows his rules and even promises to release her. Eventually he touches her before leaving, and although Kara thinks about escaping, she realizes that it's too risky. Later, Richard shows Kara his pets and admits that he likes them because they're easy to handle and don't resist being caged. He sounds regretful as he reminds Kara that her reputation will be ruined if she reports him at her house. Deborah is distraught, and Jess's neighbor reported seeing a suspicious black muscle car before Kara disappeared, reinforcing her suspicions. She is currently organizing a search party and contacting anyone she can while at Richard's house. Kara requests to use the bathroom, wondering if she can escape from there. As she is about to close the door, however, Richard appears with his gun and watches her. When she tries to wash her hands, he reminds her that she hasn't asked for permission. Kara then asks for permission and the man leers at her. Later, Richard prepares dinner, though Kara says she doesn't feel like eating. Her abductor reminds her of the rules, so she relents. She even offers to help, so Richard asks her to sweep the kitchen floor. As she does, Kara surveys the area, memorizing the name and numbers of calling cards on the fridge where the knives are kept and the notes on his calendar while watching his obedient guest. Suddenly, Richard orders her to remove her clothes at the police station. Sheriff Dale Stevens doesn't take Kara's disappearance seriously. He promises that his best people will work on the case before politely dismissing Deborah and telling her to go home in case Kara calls. Meanwhile, Richard goes to watch the news while Kara is visibly upset about what transpired earlier. When the news doesn't mention her, he gaslights her into believing that nobody cares that she's gone. He then leads her to the bedroom and tells her to climb inside the storage bin because he'll call someone. He gags her and closes the lid, causing her to hyperventilate. He gets angry at the noise but shows compassion by removing the gag and not closing the container. Kara silently cries, repeating to herself that she must survive later. Richard covers the cages and whispers goodnight to his pets. He then takes a large box from under the cages, but when he sees Kara watching him, he says, suddenly hides it. As her captor is brushing his teeth, Kara considers closing the door and escaping through the window when he leaves, but she knows she'll just get caught before sleeping. Richard chains her to the bed and whispers that he's excited for tomorrow in the morning. Kara wakes up to Richard's snores and quickly decides that this is her best chance. She works to unchain herself, then tiptoes out of the room with only escape in mind. She bolts out the front door and flags down a car with two men explaining that she was abducted when she pleads to be taken to a police station. They let her in. As they drive off, she points to an apartment unit asking them to remember it having escaped. Kara enters the police station to seek justice. She approaches the front desk and reports her abduction. Lieutenant Aaron Rowland takes Kara to his office for a detailed statement while calling for another inspector to retrieve the missing persons report and join them. He also orders for her rescuers to be interviewed. Sergeant Bonnie Jennings interviews Kara's rescuers, but they don't remember the exact apartment where she came from as things happen too fast. Kara recounts the events of her escape as Bonnie enters the room to hand over the missing persons report that Deborah filled out. Deborah soon receives a call from Aaron and learns that her daughter has been found. He hands the phone to Kara to let the two have a tearful exchange after asking Kara to identify the apartment where she was held. Bonnie and Aaron take her back to Richard's apartment complex. The units all look the same, but Kara remembers details about her abductor's pets and is able to identify the right apartment with the help of a maintenance man. However, they find no one inside later. Bonnie shows Kara pictures of Richard and she confirms that he was her abductor. Bonnie informs Kara that she will need to undergo a physical examination for evidence collection, and Aaron reports that they couldn't find registration for a black muscle car under Richard's name inside a box that Kara had mentioned. They find evidence of Richard's past crimes, including newspaper clippings and a notebook with potential targets and the routines. Jim reveals to Dale that the cold cases of Sophia, Sylvia and the List sisters are linked to Richard. The notebook contains information about potential targets, but Kara wasn't included. Jim supposes that Richard was forced to take someone else because his actual target deviated from her routine on the day of Kara's abduction. Bonnie informs the sheriffs that Richard's family has agreed to cooperate and they plan to search his mother's house the next day after her examination. Kara has an emotional reunion with her loved ones and announces her desire to go home. Bonnie explains that many officers are present for her safety and support given that Richard hasn't been caught yet. Kara goes to rest and hopes that Richard will get caught soon. The next day, Kara plans to visit Ryan despite her mother's objections. They argue until Jess arrives and Kara dismisses the conversation to spend time with her friend later. Bonnie reports that the black muscle car they believe Richard used has been found, and Kara expresses relief that justice will finally be served, invites Jess to her room there. Kara acts as if nothing happened, making Jess unsure about how to behave as Jess leaves. Kara reassures her friend that she's fine and encourages her to ask any questions she may have. Jess hesitantly asks about what happened and Kara begins to describe her harrowing ordeal. Meanwhile, Aaron interviews Richard's wife, Ashley, at the police station. She denies any knowledge of his crimes and claims to have no idea where he is. Stephanie Newell arrives and questions Ashley and Richard's mother, Maggie. Ashley becomes upset seeing Stephanie, and Stephanie's interrogation reveals that Richard may contact them to reunite with his wife. She also suspects that this isn't Richard's first time abducting women, causing Aaron to sympathize with her. Stephanie then confesses that Richard contacted her yesterday afternoon, apologizing for not admitting his crime. Sooner later, Aaron rushes into Jim's office with information about the motel where Richard is staying, which Stephanie arranged. Jim believes that Richard is still there since it's not time for checkout, so Bonnie is dispatched to the motel. However, Bonnie reports that Richard has already left, but left behind Kara's shirt. Aaron suspects a family member warned him, though Jim remains optimistic that Richard is too busy escaping to plan anything against Kara or another woman. Jim informs Aaron that the evidence found at Richard's apartment matches those in the Sylvia and List cases, and the cold cases may get resolved. All thanks to Kara at the Johnson residence. Jim introduces himself to Kara and offers to answer any questions she may have. She asks if Richard is responsible for what happened to Sophia, Sylvia and the sisters. Jim says they're still waiting for evidence to confirm it, but the contents of the box that Kara had pointed out suggest so. Kara then asks if Richard would have killed her. Jim admits they'll never know because she didn't allow him to get that chance. This realization empowers Kara, and Jim thanks her for everything she's done, calling her a survivor, not a victim. As Jim leaves, Aaron informs him that Richard used his cell phone in Jacksonville, Florida 15 minutes ago, and they suspect he's heading to his other sister in Bradenton. Bonnie contacts the Bradenton Police Department to inform them that Richard may be en route to the Johnson residence as Deborah pleads with her not to leave. Kara heads towards Jess's car, determined to move on from her abduction. Deborah insists that she needs time to recover, but Kara is resolute about getting her life back to normal and refusing to let her traumatic experience control her. Kara apologizes to her mother before leaving for the baseball game with Jess. At the game, Kara goes to wish Ryan good luck before going to her seat. Meanwhile, Bradenton officers spot Richard leading to a chase that eventually corners him. Richard takes his own life with a gunshot, ending the nightmare. The following morning, Kara wakes up feeling uneasy, but she puts on a smile as she starts her day. She finds her mother making pancakes and Deborah informs her that Richard passed away the previous night. Kara is angry that no one told her immediately, but Deborah counters that she didn't want to ruin the baseball game celebration. Kara retreats to be alone and soon Jim arrives to talk to her. Jim senses that Kara's anger is rooted in something deeper and she releases her pent-up frustration toward Richard. Kara wishes she could have told Richard that abducting her was a grave mistake. Jim admires Kara's courage and resilience and calls her a hero. He believes that Richard knew taking Kara was his downfall. Later, Bonnie advises Deborah to give Kara time to cope with her emotions. The officer leaves as Kara enters the room expressing her desire to have her freedom back. Kara reassures her mother that while she can't undo the tragedy, it doesn't change who she is and that she is a survivor.